Welcome to the second of 4 videos from the Roman Army 2021 UofW lecture on life after war. So if the last one was about celebrating victory, this one I'm going to say a little bit about some defeats. And I'm going to give you an example of one in particular. Okay. So the Romans don't always win. They often win. Sometimes they lose. I said when I talked about victory that they celebrated successes quite a lot. Sometimes they even celebrated successes when the successes weren't really successes. Augustus celebrated quite boldly that he managed to get back some standards. So here's a standard, Palaeolithic standard. From the Parthians, which were lost by Crassus when he lost Carrhae and died. But sometimes, defeats are so bad you can't really flip them around and say that they were, victories. So, and some of these left an indelible mark on Rome's psyche and mindset. Okay, so we have obviously the one I just mentioned from Carrhae, 53 BCE. So that was a big defeat, okay, and it left an indelible mark on Rome because they lost standards, and standards have these sacred components. They're so important to so many things. Augustus went to a lot of trouble to get them back, and though he did not defeat the Parthians in combat, he did manage to negotiate the return of the standards, which he then celebrated. That Prima Porta statue that I showed you, I guess it's still here. Oh no, I'm going way back to the mists of time. Oh, where are you? There it is. Celebrated. So this celebrated that success. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this and scroll back to the defeats. Okay, so that's one example. There are other big defeats the Romans suffered. Okay, I'll get back to Teutoburg Force in a second. That's the one I wanted to say a little bit about. In 85-86 CE, a couple of consuls were killed on the Danube going up against the Dacians. Much of this is murky, but it does seem, if consuls die, even if we're in the age of emperors, it's still a significant thing. And as we've seen in some previous videos and lectures, the Romans, Domitian responded. He moved more soldiers to the area. He divided the province as well as, Pannonia, and was possibly preparing for a major aggressive war, but he died. Another notable defeat came. So now, if Carrhae was when Pullo was alive, okay, sort of late Republic era, and consuls on the Danube is more. It's still too early for Polion, who's late 2nd century CE, so it's getting near the end. Adrianople is a little bit after Aemilianus, our 4th century Roman guy, and this was a spectacular defeat for the Romans. It took place in 378 CE. Adrianople is one of these places. I believe it's in modern-day Turkey, but right on the border with Greece, that has, because of its location, been the site of a number of battles in history. This was a bad one if you were a Roman, a good one if you were a Goth. In the course of the battle, the Emperor Valens was killed. We don't know entirely what happened to him. The main source of this, Ammianus Marcellinus, says as much and gives a couple of possibilities, including the chance that he managed to flee with a few soldiers, bodyguards, into maybe like a farmhouse, but they found him and whatever. Maybe they didn't know that he was the emperor. Tens of thousands died. It was well remembered by Roman sources. A lot of contemporary sources commented on the impact of this, how big it was. So it led to some changes in Roman Gothic relations. Now, we can also go back to some earlier defeats that come before the period that we're talking about. Again, I sort of start, late Republic, transition mid to late Republic, sort of late 2nd century BCE. But there were some big historical ones that did leave a mark somehow or other. So One of the biggest one is the sack of Rome, which took place, around about 390-ish BCE. Some debate about when exactly. So I believe I mentioned this one too, but in this case, it was Rome is caught in the middle. A bunch of mercenaries heading south to fight for some southern Italian neighbors of Rome's, and some fighting broke out, and possibly carried out significant damage, although some more recent stuff suggests that maybe it wasn't quite as bad. But regardless of the actual material impact on the city, it definitely seems to have left a mark culturally on the Romans. And Gauls came to be thought of as the Metis Gallicus, Gallic terror. It gives you an idea of their views of all this. And this Gallic terror persisted for centuries, many decades, and some centuries. So when the first big leader from the time frame of this course in the book on which it's based, of course, it's all about from Marius to Theodosius II. So Marius, one of the reasons why he got all these consulships, which was unprecedented at the time, in the 105, 104, 103, etc. BCE, and some of the reforms that he maybe completed or whatever, were because of concerns of contemporary Gallic-like people attacking Rome. Okay, so this fear persisted for a long time, and maybe you can make a connection between Caesar and Gaul as well. Another big defeat that took place was at the hands of Hannibal. Okay, and one of the phrases that emerged out of this that came to be used so far as we know, is something you might say to scare children. This little phrase is Hannibal's at the gates, Hannibal ad portas, okay? And Hannibal is, of course, the famous general who crossed the Alps with elephants and a big Carthaginian army, comprising Carthaginian soldiers and other mercenary soldiers. So he had a lot of success in Italy. He caused a lot of death and destruction. Then he had some big victories, especially in the first few years of the war, including at Lake Trasimene. And if you go in and read Livy gives not just a detailed account of the battle. You take it for what it's worth. But he says a lot about Roman responses to this. And if I had remembered that I had planned to do that, I would have shared some with you. But anyway, so he talks a bit about some of this. But then one of the most famous ones also is Cannae. Okay, this is one of the key defeats from history. August 216 BCE. Romans outnumber the Carthaginians by a significant margin. But because of the way the command structure worked, with both consuls at this time are key individuals. And one says, let's not fight Hannibal. The other one says, let's go for it. And because they alternated command each day, the one who didn't want to didn't on one day, and the next day the other guy said yes. And they fought, and they thought they were doing well, but then they got surrounded by Hannibal. Used a little trick, and he surrounded the Roman forces and killed many thousands of them. Okay, so that obviously had a big impact, and there's a lot of fear in Rome at the time of this Hannibal ad portas, not just a later boogeyman phrase used with children, perhaps, but also contemporary concern. Our armies have been massacred, and we are in trouble. But we won't give up. And they didn't. Okay, now just to give you a sample of one defeat, which had an impact. Some of you are already familiar with this because you did the biographies on Arminius. Okay, a lot of you did Arminius. The Teutoburg Forest is this famous battle. Here's some pictures from, I think, a video game and a site, a picture of where approximately we think it might have been. This was a battle whose location was sort of lost for a long time. So it took place in 9 CE. Rome looks like they're expanding into Germany, heading east from the Rhine and towards the Elbe, etc. Has had a fair amount of success. A few decades earlier, they'd conquered Gaul under Caesar. Now they're looking for more glory. And a Germanic, we'll call him Germanic chieftain Arminius. There's a show on Netflix, Romans Barbarians, I think it is. It's in German, but subtitles are dubbed. And it's about this from his perspective. This Arminius wasn't just a Germanic chieftain. He was had been the son of an earlier chieftain who from one of the many tribes who lived in the area, and he had been sent as a hostage along with his brother to live in Rome. This was a regular thing, hostages exchanged between elites or would go off to Rome. And so he became an officer in the Roman military, but eventually got disenfranchised or whatever, changed his mind, decided he'd rather go back to his roots, and ended up sending the Romans on a dark path. And he killed a whole bunch of Romans. I'm going to get to some of those details in a second, but the battlefield was lost. It was found a few years later by Germanicus, early imperial general, member of the imperial family, who had some successful wars of reprisal, but the loss thereafter till more recently in the last century, Calcresa. Most would say the site. Some people say it's not, but I think the evidence seems pretty good. Okay, so here, so Romans looking to go east, to get as far as the Elbe. So here's the Rhine where are you? Oh, here's the Rhine. The Elbe is further to the east. Here's Calcresa here. And so the Romans are marching. I don't know what marching. Getting rid of merchandise. And, they got this far. The story goes that Arminius had misled the commander, Quintilius Varus, about the nature of a threat posed amongst the Cherusci, etc., and people sort of in central Germany. And because he trusted him, he was a loyal, successful officer. He himself and a bunch of soldiers went off to sort of bring this uprising to an end, and Arminius sprung a trap. So the march, so far as we know, took them through like a fairly narrow spot. I mean, you sort of get a hint of this here. Okay, I mean, this is not necessarily 100% it, but big trees, forests, possibly an incline, a little hill on the one side. Okay, and soldiers marching down. If you see the Netflix version, you get a variation of that. And Arminius and his Germanic forces were hiding behind, and because the pass was narrow, the Romans and their 3 legions, etc., were quite spread out. And when the Germans attacked, it took place over a few days. There would have been, they were confined. It was unexpected. They weren't ready. The number of Roman deaths is significant. 10 to 15,000 Roman soldiers died on this day, including Varus. The Germans maybe lost 500 to 1,500 or so. The wounds or puncture, slashing, shock. They had, some of them, didn't die right away. They lasted for a couple days. Some managed to get away from this, but it was a significant defeat. So remembered back in Rome, Augustus is said to have, shouted, woken up in nightmares or whatever, Varus, give me back my legions. But, significant thing. There are lots of, if you're interested, there are lots of good modern accounts of this, and the TV show as well. We have, this one, just sort of finish this part, we have this little epitaph of someone named Marcus Caelius. So he died, in the battle, and this is from, it's in Germany, I think. So it says... So it's most of the tombstones we have are not about deaths in battle. This is one of the few ones we have, and this one is specifically about the war with Varus. And it says, to Marcus Caelius, son of Titus of the Lemonian district from Bologna in Italy, first centurion of the 18th Legion, 53 and a half years old. He fell in the Varian War. His freedman's bones may be interred here. Publius Caelius, son of Titus, the Lemonian district, his brother erected this monument. So it's not erected in Italy. It's in, I believe it's Germany. And they wouldn't have had the remains, because the remains famously stayed on site for a few years. And actually, the next video, I'll get into what happens when soldiers died. Okay, that's it for the second longish video.